Colonel Rage decided to be easygoing about all the illegal stuff we'd done to get into Area 51. He told me that the government would not file charges against Alice and Jacanto, and that they could remain at the base until I left with Urch. He arranged guest quarters for them as well as for my mom and dad. We were just waiting for the rest of the previous initiates to show up, and then I'd be heading back to Confederation Central. Charles and me son had agreed without missing a beat. Like all this time, they'd also been waiting for something to happen that could get them back into space. Niana had taken a little more convincing. "I don't want to face any hazardous situations," she told me on the phone. "Can you promise me everything will be safe?" I wasn't thrilled with the prospect of dealing with her obstructions and complaints again. I was just about to politely tell her that it was fine if she didn't want to come along, but then I remembered how brilliant she was, how she was the one who connected the dots and discovered that my father was alive and a member of the selection committee. She'd helped us to figure out how to defeat the Fad's defenses at the prison. Niana's most obvious talent was being a pain in the butt, but she was also incredibly skillful at too many other things that mattered. I supposed we could just ask the director to put a genius on our team, preferably one with combat training, but then I thought about what it would mean having to deal with a stranger. No matter how difficult Niana could be, I trusted her. Maybe she was no commando, but she had piloting and weapons training and knew how to handle herself. I also knew exactly where she stood. More than anything else, she was my friend, as much of a friend as she would let herself be, and I wanted to be surrounded by people I could count on. "Niana," I told her, "you are pretty much irreplaceable. We'll do this without you, but I don't want to have to." "Very well," she said with a sigh. "I suppose I must save my planet. Again." When I finished the phone call, I told Urch she had agreed. He then sent a message to his ship to tell Director Glee Wixix that I had accepted all her terms. He assured me that the director would send a comm beacon to Confederation Central, and they would begin the process of getting Tamret off her home world. Urch promised to let me know as soon as he had any information, which was great, but it didn't do much to alleviate my constant state of tension. I had no idea if Tamret was okay, or even if she was still alive. I lived in fear of the moment Urch would take me aside and tell me he'd received bad news. Meanwhile, I got to spend time with my family, though. My whole family. I have to admit, it was a little awkward, the three of us being together again. My mom didn't seem to know exactly what to say, and my dad seemed a little overwhelmed by being back on Earth. He could see that I was a little alarmed, and he took me aside to tell me not to worry. "This is a huge change for all of us," he said, "and your mother is worried about you as well, but it's nothing we won't get past. We just need a little time. You've got enough problems, and I promise you, this isn't one of them." Urch was as good as his word, and he gave Alice a tour of the shuttle. Her clothes had begun to get a little ripe, so now she was wearing an army t-shirt and camouflage pants. They'd managed to find stuff that fit her, and a cap that barely contained the masses of her hair. Her eyes were as large as dinner plates as she wandered around the shuttle, wanting to know everything: weapons, acceleration, navigation, and just about every other feature. She even asked about basic operations like shuttle security, storage, ballast, and tons of other boring things I could barely make myself pay attention to, except I had to since I was translating for her. "Can I get a quick tour of the actual starship?" she asked.
"No, that's not going to happen,"
Urch told her through me. "Please," she begged, but Urch was adamant. Finally, she accepted the decision and stormed off.
"You like them fiery,"
Urch told me. "Well, you want the fiery ones on your side in a pinch."
"Good thing you're leaving her behind,"
he said.
"That one is trouble."
The next morning, I woke up and found me-son and Niana in the commissary, looking sleepy and jet-lagged. It was great to see them. I gave them both hugs, and for once neither of the girls was reserved. Me-son was grinning so broadly she almost looked like a different person. Your face, I shouted. It's cracking. She actually laughed. She'd been so serious and critical when I'd first met her. I sometimes forgot how much she had changed during our time on Confederation Central. Now I looked at these two girls who had seemed to hate me when we first set out into space, but whom I'd come to like and trust. They both wore jeans and interesting long-sleeved t-shirts, like they coordinated their outfits. Maybe they had, but more importantly, I realized, they were dressed not for looks, but to be practical. These were clothes that gave them freedom to move, but wouldn't get in the way. They were ready for action, and I wondered if they were as happy to get back to the Confederation as I was. I sat down at the table with them. Maybe we'll have a chance to set things right this time. They both nodded. They like they'd been thinking the same thing.
I hate to admit it, Diana said, but returning to my life, though it is interesting and glamorous, has been a bit of an adjustment. Maybe if Junip hadn't chosen to make us all villains, I'd feel differently, but I somehow don't quite belong in my own home anymore.
Mi-san nodded. I know exactly what you mean. All the things that used to seem important now feel silly. I hate that we left so much undone.
We came so close to securing Earth's place in the Confederation,
Diana agreed.
We did secure it. If it hadn't been for that awful alien, the world would be a different place.
Well, they're giving us another chance, I said. This time, we've got to be careful not to do anything that someone like Junip can object to.
And you say Steve will be joining us? And Temrat?
Mi-san said, arching her eyebrows. Yeah, I'll have to remind both of them to be on their best behavior, but the main thing is, we're back in it. We have another chance. It's so crazy. People become doctors or politicians or whatever because they want to try and take on big challenges, but none of them have the shot at the kind of difference we could make. We all knew that the Confederation had its problems, and it was certainly populated by some very flawed beings, but it also had so much to teach us. We were lucky to have gone to the Confederation once, and now we were going back. I felt a nagging anxiety, though. I still had no idea what the director needed from me. Why did she have to travel all this way and make all these agreements to meet with a middle school kid from Earth? I was dying to know, but at the same time I dreaded finding out. That afternoon, another small plane landed, this one carrying Charles. I watched him descend the steps and walk towards us on the runway. There was something different about him. His gait had a confident swagger, but there was more to it than that. I then realized that his clothes were different too. He wore a white shirt, open at the collar, and a brown canvas vest. His pants were a faded blue, tucked into high boots, and he wore a thick belt slung loose at the waist. By the time we were close enough for me to shake his hand, I realized why his outfit looked so familiar. You are totally dressed like Han Solo. This time, he told me, wagging his finger like a cartoon schoolteacher, I have come prepared. For cosplay?
I always held out hope that we would have another chance to go back to the Confederation, so I have been studying.
Now I was really curious. Studying what?
Television, cinema, comic books. All of it, he said cheerfully. I have turned myself into a nerd.
I looked him up and down. I'd say you're more of a fanboy.
There's no need to address me as though I were a nerf herder,
he said with mock seriousness. Then he started to walk towards the main building.
Come, let us get a cold drink and discuss the many differences between the original Battlestar Galactica and the remake.
Now that everyone had arrived, Urch injected everyone with nanites for translation and to activate a limited HUD. We could not rack up experience points or gain levels, but we were told we'd get data bracelets once we boarded the ship. We all had dinner together that night. My mom, my dad, Colonel Rage, Urch, Jacanto, Alice, Mi-san, Diana, and Charles. It was one of those weird moments when people from all different parts of your life, not to mention the galaxy, are all together in the same place. Everyone seemed to enjoy each other's company, though my mom kept casting uncomfortable glances at Urch's plate. I had been afraid that Alice was going to be glum or resentful, but she seemed upbeat and was chatty with Charles, me son, and Diana. It was a great evening, and I wished I could have enjoyed it more, but I couldn't shake my worry for Temret. The idea of getting back to her had been a pipe dream for so long, but now I was going to see her soon, and the things she must have been going through all these months became more real and urgent, and all the more terrible because they were unknown. Then there was the business with our mission. What could the most powerful being in the Confederation want from me? The next day, I had to say goodbye to my mother yet again. Only this time she wasn't sick, and this time I wasn't leaving her alone. She and my father hadn't quite gotten their rhythm back, but I could see they were working on it. They both wanted to make up for lost time, and that was good enough for me. My mother hugged me tightly, and then my father took me aside. "I know you have to do this," he said, "and I know there's no point in telling you to be careful, but I'm going to tell you anyhow." I nodded. "Any thoughts on who I can trust?" "Your friend Urch seems pretty solid. He thinks highly of Glee Wixix, but I don't know her. You'll have to use your best judgment. She's been on the right side of most important issues, but she went to school with Junip, and they were friends until a few years ago. I don't like it. I wish Dr. Roop could be there for you. He's pretty much the most trustworthy being in the Confederation. You can trust your friends, of course, but they'll be out of the loop just like you. Captain Hyai on the ship seems like a good being, but I got a bad vibe from the crew. Most of them wear Junip's Movement for Peace armbands, which means they won't be on your side. Don't say anything private around someone you don't know." "What do you think the director wants?" I asked. "I wish I knew," he said, sighing. "I can't imagine what's worth the risk of angering her political enemies by bringing you back to the station. Something big is going on, Zeke, and you're going to need to step very carefully." "You know, I still never found out about how you got to the Confederation in the first place," I said. He laughed. "That's a strange story, but a long one. It'll have to wait till you get back." "I'll hold you to that." I gave him another hug. "I'll see you soon." He smiled at me, shaking his head like he couldn't believe this was it, that I was really going, leaving him behind on Earth while I went back into space. Jacanto and Colonel Rage came into the room. Jacanto came over and shook my hand.
"Don't forget the little people, okay?"
"Thanks for everything, Jacanto. I wouldn't have made it without you."
"It turns out we were running away from the good guys. They would have caught up eventually, and you'd be right here, doing just what you're doing. The way I see it, I mostly kept you from getting to your friends sooner."
"We did it the hard way, that's for sure," I agreed. "But we didn't know that at the time. We thought I was in real danger, and you took a lot of risks to help me."
"I just wanted to see if this stuff was real," he said. "Besides, it was fun. You ever need to go on the run again, give me a call, alright?"
I laughed. Given my track record, I may end up doing just that. I looked around. "Where's Alice?" Jacanto shook his head.
"Alice took it kinda hard, being left behind. I know it wasn't your call, and she would have been out of her depth. But she wanted to go. You understand, right? I think it would have been too upsetting to say goodbye."
I did understand, but I was a little angry. She and I had been through a lot. I owed her, and I meant to repay her someday. I understood she wanted to head out with us, but that she would let me go without even wishing me good luck felt kinda crummy. "Well, thank her for me, will you?" Jacanto nodded.
"I will. Now go do what you've got to do."
Colonel Rage led us to a door, and we were all ushered through. I took one look back, catching a last glimpse of my parents before I left the planet.